about if she really had trust in God. She read this book, God's Smuggler. You know, this man who was smuggling Bibles behind the Iron Curtain. This Dutch missionary, and it's just a bunch of incidents, one after the other, of where he got the Bibles through customs just by having absolute confidence that God would get the Bibles through. Like this particular Bible society had a bunch of Bibles printed in Romanian, in the Romanian language, because the congregations in Romania weren't able to get Bibles. And so these communist custom inspectors were opening all the suitcases, and he had just suitcases full of Bibles, you see. And these, of course, are contraband in the Iron Curtain countries. And so this custom inspector, in his case, just marked his as okay without opening them. Or in another time, they opened the trunk to his Volkswagen, which he was taken across the East German border, and these were German Bibles, and they opened the trunk of the front of the Volkswagen that he was driving, and that was full of Bibles, and they looked right at the Bibles but didn't see them. Or in another case, they confiscated all the Bibles, but they confiscated them because they had such a terrific black market value, and he wasn't in that country able to contact the people who were Bible the church groups in that particular country, but because they got in the hand of a greedy individual who would get them to people who were paying high black market prices for these Bibles, and at least the Bibles reached people who were willing to pay the prices for them, you see. So, I mean, it just kept going like that. Well, anyhow, this girl had read this book, and she was just disappointed as anything that she didn't have the faith in Baba like this man had the faith in God. She just was so afraid that they wouldn't have enough money to pay the next month's bills, or that if she ever had that much faith that Baba would take her husband away, their husband would die, or some of her children would die. She was going through this kind of a thing, you see. But then finally one day in her prayers one morning, she just suddenly realized that if she was a real Sufi, that a real Baba lover, that she would have to have that kind of faith in Baba. And so she told Baba, well, Baba, I really want to have that much faith in you. And she just expected that some huge disaster would befall her as a result of this, you see. But what happened was that no such disaster befell her, but instead she started to worry about all kinds of things. She started to worry that her husband would lose her job. She started to worry that they wouldn't be able to make the next month's rent, or that when it rained, the house was going to leak, and I mean, all this kind of thing. And suddenly, you see, what Baba does when you really say that you do want to learn to have that kind of faith in him, he presents you with the things that you really are attached to and really have to give up. She has to be ready to not feel the security of a bank account. She has run into the kind of things that have stripped her bank account to nothing, but she always has just enough for the next month. And so she has to learn to live from day to day. And she was looking for security in a bank account, and now that's been taken away from her, you see. But not in any horrendous way, but just enough so that she really has to practice the presence of God. And that's what she wanted to do, and so Baba answered her prayer, you see. And she hadn't put that together, so I helped her to put it together in that way, because that's where she's at. And she's given exactly the lesson that she has to learn. Now, I don't know how many of you know John Skiff. Did any of you know about John Skiff? John was down here. He was in one of my classes, and he came down here on a visit to look for a job, actually, and he was at his aunt's house here and broke his neck as a result of diving in a swimming pool, and he's paralyzed from the shoulders down, and he's and so he's up there and he's confined to a wheelchair, and he's one of my Sufi students. Well, there's just thousands of things that are happening surrounding John. But I mean, I have never seen a person who has been put through as much as that fellow has, as far as testing his own faith in Baba. He told me that when he dived into the pool, he hit this inner tube wrong and it broke his neck. He says, and as soon as he had done it, he knew that he had probably broken his neck, and he sank to the bottom of the pool, and he wanted to swim back to the surface, but nothing would work. His arms and legs wouldn't work. And so he was down there at the bottom of the pool with his eyes open and trying to figure out how he could signal anybody up on top that something was wrong, and he just kept repeating Baba's name until he blanked out, he said. And then the next thing he knew was that he was up at poolside with some paramedics working over him, and he was still repeating Baba's name, and the paramedics were saying, "What's he saying?" And his mother said, "He's saying Mer Baba," and so then he got embarrassed and he stopped. But then he. As he was in the hospital, he of course, if you drown, you get pneumonia, and since his rib cage was paralyzed, why he only had 25% use of his lungs and all this kind of thing, and so the doctors were trying to prepare him for the fact of telling him that he was going to be that way for the rest of his life, and he already knew they were going to tell him that, so when they, as they were getting, he knew that they were setting him up to give him the bad news and all this. He knew this already, you see, and so he was really thinking. He told me that he was really meditating on his situation and so forth, and it occurred to him that he could ask Baba at that point to get well, to make it so the damage could be repaired. And he prayed instead that Baba would let that happen, which would bring him closer to him. And then after that, the doctors came in and they wanted to tell him something. He just told them to beat it, that he wasn't interested in hearing what they had to say. And I mean, if ever a person has to fight off depression and something like this, he's going through all this kind of thing. But the fact is that I see constantly in the things that he is going through that this incident of breaking his neck is the thing that's putting him up against the problems that he has to go through in order to come closer to Baba. And there is no other happening that would have brought him up against the kind of problems that were necessary for his own recognizing that he is not this body. No other happening could have made that happen other than the fact that he has to live with this hunk of clay that he can't manipulate anymore. And he's only 22 years old, and yet he will learn the lesson in this lifetime that he has. Now, we're not in any sense through with this. I don't know, how many of you know Alain Ewell? Alain, through some, for some reason that he himself didn't figure out, got training in the Dalman Delicato system of reestablishing nerves that don't work anymore, and they don't have by any means 100% success. I guess it's something less than 50%, maybe something like 30% success of bypassing injured spinal cords, and this is by putting people through patterning exercises. And we have volunteers that give John a massage every day. We have volunteers that put him through the Dalman Delicato exercise. It takes 4 people every other day to put him through a half hour's worth of exercises. And we have volunteers that give him an hour's massage every day, and to keep his muscles in tone against the day that he might be able to walk again. Really, it's really marvelous to see the focusing that John becomes a part of. He had one particular attendant. The state will pay minimum wage for an attendant for 36 hours a week worth of attendant care. And John, he had a pretty darn incompetent attendant, and his mother was after him to fire this incompetent attendant. But John said, he says, I'm getting so much help from everybody else. This guy can't hold a job other than this one. He says, the least I could do is take care of a guy who can't take care of himself. But finally, he finally had to fire him. The fact is that he hung on to him far beyond the time that would have been reasonable to hang on to somebody who was that way. Well, I just give you this as an example of the kinds of things that Baba will put a person through if that's his path. And all the discussions I have with John really show me that he's coming to realize that what he is experiencing in this is something that's, he looks at the whole thing as a necessary thing that he has to go through in order to be liberated. And whether he gets well or whether he is in this body until he drops it into this incapacitated body will be only determined by which route is the most important for him to get back to God. That the whole object of the whole thing is to get back to God. No fewer than 4 doctors have suggested suicide to him. The fact is that some doctors try to do for a person what can be done, but there are other doctors who can't stand to look failure in the face. And present medical science does not have any cure for this, and they just look at him as a useless, already dead man, and they just like to see that problem out of the way because they just see that this is maintenance care and waiting for him to die, and so they just suggest to him that they realize ought to shoot himself. And John has a very healthy attitude toward this, but as a matter of fact, something like that doesn't help depression at all, you see. Well, I simply pointed out to him that, well, this certainly tells you, this certainly shows you who is the more stable. But of the two of you, doesn't it? I mean, the doctor is basically telling you that I can't handle this problem. I couldn't handle this problem if I had it. But I mean, John, of course, is not even considering any such thing. But I mean, it's amazing what you get handed, isn't it? I mean, any time you think you're having a difficult time on your way back to God, think of John, and ask yourselves if you could handle one like that as well as he's handling it. Could you, at the critical time, make that kind of a prayer? And you see, what it really comes down to is that if John had fallen into the worship of youth and physical vitality and sex that is rampant in society today, if that had been uppermost, he couldn't have offered a prayer like that. And so the question is always, this is what is involved in holding on to Baba's Dhamma. Yes?
When Baba works in illusion, he has to work with the laws of illusion, including the laws of the human body.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there is such a thing as a person could go into a state where it would be impossible for Baba to heal them, or whether Baba can always, if he wants, he could just always heal John or anybody else, and whether a person can think that, as long as I'm in this condition, it's because this is the way Baba wants me to be, or would they think, well, I've gone beyond the point where even Baba can help me, and maybe my lesson for being in this stage is over, but maybe Baba can't do anything about it now, and so I'm stuck for the rest of my life, because, Baba can only work along with the laws of the body and so on.
Oh, good.
And they can be sure that, well, Baba wants me to be this way, therefore,
in the first place, there is no such thing as a person who's beyond the point where Baba can help him. I mean, that is just absolutely not so. Baba can make anything happen, and I mean, I'm even talking about. You see, it's not, Baba doesn't do a miracle. What happens is it's just within the actual laws of nature. I mean, Baba doesn't step outside the law of nature. Baba says whenever a miracle has happened, it is your own faith in me that brings it about. And I see John and his useless body, but on the other hand, I know perfectly well that this body can indeed be made whole and vital again. Now, the one thing is that as long as there are people who are working on John and massaging him and giving him these exercises that expect reward for their efforts in the form of a miracle, that's not going to happen. I meet with these people every week, and we have quite a discussion on what's going on in John's case. We have a half-hour session on every Friday night, and I sit down with all the volunteers, and we go over what's happened during the course of the past week. And it comes up every once in a while that somehow or other something has come through that they feel something is moving, and they're all agog, waiting for the next thing to happen. And I said, look, There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. Don't worry about it. There's something that is your role to do right now, and the work itself is its reward. And if you're looking for being associated with a miracle as something that you're looking for, forget it. That in itself is your reward. And if you allow that kind of thing to creep in, then it's not going to happen. One has to work absolutely selflessly in that kind of thing. So as soon as someone starts to think he's beyond the point where even Baba can help him, what the person's really doing is assessing whether or not this miracle they're hoping for has any possibility of happening. And as such, it would be best if they weren't associated with the work. And what's happening is that people who volunteer for this, and the thing moves so painfully slowly that they don't see anything happening, what's really happening is that they're getting to a different place themselves. So they generally drop out of the work. It's only the people who are really selflessly concerned with John that actually stay in this thing while apparently nothing is happening. Now, I don't know whether anything actually ever will happen or not. All of us, when we work with John in his massage, visualize John as walking. But we also know that we don't expect that to happen, and it's quite an exercise in working selflessly for Baba to be working with a case like that. Let me just assure you absolutely that Baba can make anything happen that he wants. I stopped by to see Baba in 1960 for a week on my way out to the Middle East. And while I was there, there was a man there in Mandalay Hall who had just brought a little girl back to life by repeating Baba's name over her. And what had happened was that he'd gone on this tour. This is described in the family letters. He had gone around spreading Baba's message through some villages, and what had happened was that in that village they said, "Can your Baba bring a person back to life?" And they said, he said, "Oh yes." He felt he just had to say this, and they said, "Well, we have this little girl who died here, and can your Baba bring her back to life?" "Oh yes," he said, "he can." So he took the child on his lap, and he just said Baba's name over her for some period, and slowly the girl started to breathe again, and then came back to life and was well and up around playing. And while I was there in Pune, Baba was discussing this thing with this person, and he said, "Why did you do this?" And he said, "Well," he said, "none of the people there would have believed in you if I didn't do this, and so I was sure that it would happen." And Baba says, "But what you do when you do this," he says, "you do this by your own faith in me." And he says, "If you do it in front of people like this, I will get the reputation for doing miracles, and I don't do miracles." He said, "Yes, Baba, I told them this, but Baba said, it happened because of your faith in me." And he says, "Yes, Baba, I understand." He says, "Well, don't do it anymore." And he twisted his ears by way of punishment. And then he says, "But I forgive you this time." So I mean, Baba can restore the dead to life. He can make a broken body whole. Your faith in Baba can do this, but the point is that I mean, if a person translates his faith in Baba to a physical result, he can bring it about. Our focus is not that. Our focus is that God's will be done. And if it's necessary for John to stay the rest of his life in that body, then that be Baba's will. But we still strive as best we can to restore John's body with what is available to us. And if that can happen, then it will happen. And if it can't happen, if it's not supposed to happen for John's own spiritual ongoing, then that is what will happen. We don't try to tell Baba what he's supposed to have happen. We're satisfied with what is his will. Yes, Dana?
But yesterday you cleared this up, but I think for the people that are not here, and I think it'll bear repeating, you said something very wonderful about work. We have a beautiful center here, and some people feel that we have overreached ourselves, and at the same time, the same people feel that we're not accomplishing anything, that they don't see the progress. It's like the people working on John, some drop off, they feel nothing don't help, and so I wish you'd repeat something you said about the nature of Baba's work in connection with this center, for instance. Some say we have overreached ourselves financially, and at the same time they contradict themselves by saying, well, nothing's happening. The fact that we overreached ourselves is, I think, very significant. I think it shows spirit, and that's what Baba wants.
Well, I would just say that like at our Sufi center, the thing is that people have to know what the problem is. If you have a problem, if you have a financial problem or something like this, but like for example at the Sufi center, we are dependent on volunteer contributions and volunteer work to keep the center in shape. And like on one evening, Murshida said that we don't have enough volunteers to keep the center cleaned, vacuumed, dusted, and so forth. And she said, there's a small group of the same volunteers that keep doing this, and we need a larger group. Now, if anyone can help Selma with people to assign to this work, raise your hands. And so some people raised their hands, and she said, all right, well, all of those, see Selma afterwards as to what you can do. And that solved that particular problem. I mean, you have to tell the people when there's a problem. But if it has to be a constant matter of constantly having fundraising or drives for volunteers, where every meeting is a question of we have to meet this month's rent and so forth, then the time has come to do less, because the work has to the contributions and so forth have to be spontaneous. And of course, the key to the whole thing is that you do Baba's work in Baba's way. I mean, that's where the whole basis of it is. There has to be love and honesty first, and then everything else is forthcoming. And as soon as it's very subtle, people can want to embody Baba's work in a center so badly that they start trying to raise money so that they can reach some kind of a goal, so that they can make their imagined goal happen. They feel that they themselves are making it happen by what they do, by the image that they preserve, or by the fundraising drives that they make work and so forth. And as soon as somebody starts to think of themselves as necessary in order to make it happen, the work is destroyed. And it's so easy to fall into that. The watchword has to be love and honesty. And really, if one starts to get over into that kind of thing, I mean, this is really what a religion is. This is what a cathedral building program is. And organization for the sake of organization, a building for the sake of a building, volumes of publications are just symbols of activity. No, the first thing has to be the fact that Baba lovers love to be with other Baba lovers. And there's nothing that they want to do more than to be among people who have been touched by Baba in that way. And then when that is first, then all the other stuff happens easily. Now, there still have to be certain of your members that you work, that you appoint to coordinate all this stuff and to act as focal points, and that do that work of keeping the whole thing together. But you must support these people if you elect them to do that kind of thing for you. But as soon as someone thinks that the place couldn't get along without them, and that their work is more important than somebody else's work, and that they're not getting enough appreciation for how much they're doing, and no thanks, Baba's work is always thankless. Baba always creates the situations that it looks like you don't know what you're doing, and that's fine. I mean, that's great. If you really know you're doing Baba's work, and everybody else thinks that you're lousing things up, that's ideal. Then you have really achieved that state where Baba alone knows what you are doing for him, and that's what you'd really like to have happen. So when every individual worker looks at it that way, then Baba's work is getting done. Yes. Oh, yeah, we're at 11:35. Is there one more question? Yes, John.
Could you say something about the nature of worry and how it's detrimental on the path and what one can do about it?
Okay, the question was, would I say something about nature, the nature of worry and what to do about it? Baba has told us to be absolutely honest. Baba has also told us not to worry. Baba says it's almost impossible not to worry, but try. You have to look at the injunction not to worry as an order, and that if you find yourself worrying, you are disobeying Baba. If you start to look at it this way, you can actually develop mechanisms for stopping worrying. I ran into this once where I worked. I was ready to leave on vacation, and I felt I had just finished $10,000 worth of pilot plant work, and this $10,000 worth of work was embodied in 2 one-gallon cans of very scarce material. And I suddenly realized that I was worried that the people in whose hands I was leaving these 2 samples of asphalt to work with, I really didn't have very much confidence in their ability to do the work correctly. So I realized that I was worrying as I was about to leave on my 5 weeks vacation. Well, what I realized as soon as I realized I was worrying, I asked myself, what am I worried about? Well, the first thing that I was worried about was that the fellow who was going to take over the work, I was so sure was going to louse it up that I hadn't even bothered to check him out in what he should do if the results came out differently from what I had anticipated. So what I did was I called him in, and I actually went over not only the work that he was supposed to do with the samples, but all the possible results that he could get and what to do in each eventuality. Okay, then after I had done that, I asked myself, well, why are you still worrying? And the reason I was still worrying was because I was sure he wasn't going to be able to follow those instructions correctly, but I really didn't know why. But I asked myself, have you done everything that was possible to do? And I said, yes. Well, then the rest of it's in God's hands. Are you now worried about the fact that God won't make it turn out the way you think it ought to? And that was really what it came down to. So I decided to forget about that aspect of the thing and just leave it in God's hands when I was gone. Well, what actually happened was that we had a technician there who was a one-man walking disaster. And he had taken these 2 samples and had left them next to the garbage can. And the next day, after I left on my vacation, the janitors had picked this thing up and thrown it in the dumpster, and the gardeners had dumped a bunch of grass cuttings on top of and all these grass cuttings and asphalt got all mixed up. And so the next morning, while they sleuthed the samples down in the dumpster, and they spent the rest of the 5 weeks trying to separate the grass cuttings from the asphalt. And in the process, they wrecked the samples. And so when I came back, here I was in the midst of a filtering operation of samples of dissolved asphalt which they had scorched by trying to take the solvent back off them and so forth. It was a complete loss. But the fact is that I had had 5 worry-free weeks of vacation, and I came back into the task. And as a matter of fact, what happened was, but by the time the 5 weeks had gone by, the situation had changed, so we weren't interested in that result anymore. So you see, Baba takes care of all these things, but I could very easily have worried for nothing for 5 weeks. So, well, with that, let's just have a moment of silence, and then let's close. Jessawala.